name is Brady Dale. I'm a reporter with The Defiant, a site you should definitely check out. We cover decentralized finance and everything going on blockchains these days. We're here today to talk about gaming and crypto and how those two things interact, and they've been doing really well this year. So I'm here today with Amy Wu of Lightspeed Ventures, who's made some relevant investments here and is interested in the topic. And then also Jeff Sterlin, one of the co-founders of Sky Mavis, the company that really is driving this conversation right now. They made Axie Infinity. For those who don't know, Axie Infinity is a game that has some similarities to some historical games, but is just driving an insane amount of activity right now, and is as a product on Ethereum is actually making more money than Ethereum itself. At least it was the last time I checked. Maybe that's not still true, but it's doing pretty okay. So we're here to talk about that and what's to come in gaming and why it is this is the moment that people are so excited. So hello, Amy and Jeff.
Hey, Brady. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Yeah, glad to be here with you guys. I don't know why I can't see either of you yet. Okay, great. Hopefully the rest of the world can. So all right, let's start with a really. I want to get specific into like Axie and you guys' particular interests in a second. But let's start with a really broad thing, which I've heard some of my fellow journalists have been sort of like, what's going on with this idea? Everyone talks about the metaverse these days, but the metaverse seems like it's becoming one of those terms that's becoming so broad, it's almost meaningless. It's like the metaverse is Discord, the metaverse is Twitter, the metaverse is, also the game environments. So what's you guys' framing on that? And like, how do you think about what the metaverse is? How do you define it? And why is it useful? I guess most importantly, why is it useful to kind of expand the boundaries beyond games itself? Whoever wants to start.
Jeff, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So the way that I'm looking at it right now, at least this week, is I see it as a substrate where we're forming deep economic and social relationships with anyone, anywhere in the world. And yeah, we're doing it in new ways, right? So I guess it's sufficiently broad, right? I mean, so the way that I'm seeing stuff unfold, right, is first we had DeFi, these blockchains as well, right, which allow for the transfer of financial value. And then now we're seeing the rise of NFTs, right, which is kind of like the content layer. We're seeing gaming and art exploding, right? So this is like enough to capture consumer interests and adoption and allowing us to do something with the financial rails. That's allowing us to kind of keep the attention of users and people, I guess. And then I guess the next aspect of it is right, kind of like the social coordination layer, right? Some people might think of that as like DAOs and community tooling. So yeah, I think like the metaverse is right, like the intersection of all these. So it's like, right, like these large internet communities having fun together, but also coordinating large amounts of social and financial capital. So that's, I guess, the way that I'm looking at it.
That's great. Yeah. Digital economy meets sort of like, IRL meets digital world as well. And I think a lot of people have talked about the format of it and sort of like the different parts of that ecosystem. I always boil it down to, if you're going to have a metaverse, people have to care about that. And at the core layer of it starts with identity and reputation. And so that basically creates something meaningful for people to care about. And so I actually do believe like the first iteration, the first version of the metaverse is the social networks. If you think about, in crypto, like in Twitter, for example, whole communities in crypto have been built onto Twitter. They have their online identity could be totally different from their offline one. Many people, I have no idea like whether they're male, female, personality, age, etc. And it doesn't like really matter. And that is like, in my perspective, like a metaverse, Discord as well. And so with that identity and people caring about the reputation they build on top of that, then you start building the other things that Jeff mentioned, like the economies of it, the what you do in that metaverse, etc. But I think it does start there.
Folks have a hard time with is, if like about Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, for example, like the metaverse was this idea that there would be this cyberspace that felt a lot like the real world that you would go into. And like, that was the metaverse, this kind of giant game environment. And so I think folks find it confusing to like expand it out to like, you know, places where players talk. So, you know, why is it useful to expand it out in that way?
So I don't know. I try and look at it as through a product lens, right? It's like, so what are the benefits of the real world? And then like, okay, are those benefits, right? So it's like, okay, can those benefits be simulated in a virtual environment without a 3D immersive environment? That makes sense. So I think they can. So I think, I don't know, maybe Hollywood and books have, I think, narrowed people's definition, or they think that there must be this immersive environment aspect to it, which I don't think is necessarily a prerequisite. I think it's something that we, you know, it's maybe a wishful thing, but I don't know. I also think that, right, like, the future rarely unfolds exactly how we think it's going to. So, I mean, we already are seeing, you know, we're seeing these metaverse Filipino workers who are playing Axie Infinity, you know, putting food on the table. That's real, right? Like, does it, the data, it doesn't require them to put on some kind of spacesuit and glasses, right? In fact, the people who need this the most, they're not going to be able to afford stuff like that for, you know, decades. So I think like relying on something like that is maybe a little bit too strict, and maybe not, you know, I hate to say this, but maybe not inclusive to the people who might need this the most.
Yeah.
So, and that helps. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Amy. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to add, yeah, the communications layer is important because, again, like that actually creates social fabric of what is like, you know, a digital world, right? And so I think about it as like, you know, Maslow hierarchy of needs. Like people have deep social needs of like, you know, love and beyond, belonging, self-esteem, etc., that they form in these groups to promote their identity and reputation. And then I think the beauty of like, for example, Axie Infinity is that people can earn money. That is absolutely a core need. And so you combine all of that together and people start spending large amounts of time, resources into whatever it is, that world that's been created. And those are the building blocks of a metaverse.
You know, just randomly, it just happens to be there's a guy on Twitter that I've been talking to forever. We just sort of have common interests, and I guess I've moved to his neighborhood, so we're getting together tonight for drinks finally. So I guess I'm having one of those metaverse. Twitter's the only real metaverse I've ever been a part of, I guess. But I guess I'm having a metaverse moment this evening. So hopefully that'll be cool. Yeah. So I wanted to. So the thing about folks making money on Axie comes to kind of my next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about. Is so blockchain games, are people excited about them right now because they're fun, or because they can make money on them? And, you know, does the distinction matter? Let's start with you, Amy. You ended the last one. Start with you.
Sure. The distinction, I would say like they're two different things, right? Like I think, you know, the Axie game is fun for a lot of people, but people also make money. Ultimately, if you look at the gaming industry or entertainment, like people stick around like in the longer term because they are getting value from that, right? Whether it is earning money or because they're having fun. And so I think you're getting like two different types of players. Like a player is on the platform, and probably a bunch of them are actually having fun, but a lot of them are also serving a basic need of minimum wage, right? And so they're expecting to earn money off of this game. And then you have a bunch of other people that are playing for the PvP mode and looking forward to the kind of like the land games because that's like fun. They get to play with other players. And you really do need both in the long run to balance out a game ecosystem.
Yeah. So I've done some surveying, right? And it's around 45% of our users say that the in-game economy is the most important thing. But the other 55% are saying that, you know, the community or the gameplay are the most important thing. And I think it is really it's a combination, right? This is the first time that you can kind of transparently play a game and actually retain some of the value. So growing up, you know, that was always a dream of mine, and I was always trying to do that and running into huge issues. And yeah, I was having a lot of fun playing World of Warcraft and playing Diablo, right? Like I guess grinding is actually not really that fun in those systems, right? So it's like that's like a little bit longer, it's a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, I think it is
this, when you're grinding, just to define it for people in case they don't know, because I'm not like a super gamer. Grinding is when you're just like doing the grunt work to get resources, right?
So basically games have always used these incentive mechanisms, right? So some people, they play, right, just to get like cool loot, and that's the thing that, you know, lights up their, you know, dopamine receptors, right? Others are trying to make friends in these universes. So I think, right, play to earn is just one additional, I think, very powerful incentive mechanism that game designers will now have at their disposal, right? It's just another incentive loop. We've always used incentive loops to control, I guess, and encourage gamers to interact with the content that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So maybe some 101 on like, how do game designers think about building a game, right? At the core of it is everybody is playing for some sort of like progression towards a payout. That is like deep in the psychology of like why somebody would spend the time to play a game. They start a new game, they spend the first, I don't know, like an hour or so, like learning the game. And then in the mid game is where they're grinding. They're essentially like progressing themselves towards mastery of the game, whether that is like leveling up their characters, collecting items, you know, beating a bunch of other players to level up their character, earning money, built, you know, sort of leveling up their axie, like, etc. And that is like core game loops that game economists and designers basically build into the game. And then at some point they're like, okay, I feel like I've like mastered this game. I've gotten to a great level. I'm an advanced player. And at that point, the game designer is like, how do I surprise delight this player and continue to get have them wanting more content from me, to keep them spending money with me and spending time with me, and that's the elder game. Like this, managing this whole like player progression is a core for any game designer. And so like to Jeff's point, like you know, the play to earn loop is like one of them, and also, you know, managing people playing like PvE mode or PvP mode. Those are all sort of different player journeys that, you know, people go through in the game.
So I always like to, when I run these things, I always like to just jump right in at first and then come back to really who we're talking to. So I think this is a good time to do that. You both kind of, you know, showed a little bit about yourselves in those last answers, but maybe you could both introduce your, I mean, not your whole background, but like your relationship to games and why this is a priority for each of you really quickly. And then I want to come back to some stuff about Axie. But first, like, yeah, why don't you both just sort of say who you are and why you care about games?
Sure, I guess I'll go first. I'm Jeff. I'm a co-founder of Sky Mavis. We're the inventors, creators of Axie. Yeah, I've always been a gamer. So growing up, I was an only child. So I played games most of my free time. And the first thing that I ever did on the internet was play StarCraft. So I think early on, our generation, we kind of understood that games could be these portals to new emerging technologies. Yeah, I was always the kid who, you know, if I played a game, my entire school would play that game. So people, yeah, what else? Yeah, I'm also a collector, a lifelong collector. I grew up collecting insects and fossils. So I think that overlap, right, of collecting and gaming is kind of what brought me and made it so that NFTs kind of just immediately made sense to me. Yeah, I was always trying to monetize my time in game. Neopets, Diablo, World of Warcraft, always running up into friction and TOS violations, and felt like these systems were kind of working against me. Yeah. So yeah, I always felt like, I always think of myself as a kid, right? Like I'm a gamer who wants to spend time in game, but like the people around him don't want him to play, right? Like my mom really didn't want me to play because people, there's a stigma that gaming is this huge waste of time, right? But if we can create games that have real world benefits, social and economic benefits, then maybe this can change. I think it's important, right? Because like we're seeing, for example, the Communist Party now like cracking down on children's right to play games, I guess. So.
Axie, your first full-on professional game you've been a part of, or are you a veteran of some other game efforts?
Yeah, I like to think that I played kind of played World of Warcraft semi-professionally as a kid. Back then, it was very difficult to monetize. But yeah, I was never a game developer, right? I think the current, the traditional gaming ecosystem, it's like you need a publisher, you need to raise huge money for marketing costs, right? So I think like a lot of it, right, is just the barriers to entry because of all the middlemen involved is just impossible. So even if you've wanted to build a game all your life, it's really, really difficult as a struggling indie dev that's never had a hit game before. So I think that's also one of the things that NFTs can help equalize or kind of level this playing field of barrier to entry, where if you are if you have a good idea for a game and you have good art and you have good community building skills on your team, then you can basically go out there, right? Even get funded by the community at first to get some initial traction, to get this initial community before you have to play the more, buttoned up game, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay. So congratulations. Amy, what about you? What's your connection to games?
Yeah, I've been a lifelong gamer. I mean, I'd probably spend more time playing games than anything else I did growing up. A big first-person shooter player, like on CS:GO, and then it was like Left 4 Dead 1 and 2. Play all the Resident Evil games. Huge like horror survival shooter fan. All of the Blizzard games as well, like Diablo and otherwise. So I first started working in it professionally when I was at Insight, and we had taken private jagex RuneScape and learned a lot of lessons there, including how angry players can get if you mess with their gameplay monetization. And then at Lightspeed, I lead a lot of our game investments, and so we have a few theses. We just think that gaming is already the biggest entertainment category in the world, and it's only growing from here. So last year, I think $175 billion of in-game spend alone, not even including hardware, sort of PlayStation boxes and otherwise, and also things like Twitch and the rest of the ecosystem, and 2 billion gamers today. Also, the gaming and social world are colliding. They're becoming one and the same. I think the next sort of big social networks may well find themselves in games first. And also you see this gamification of consumer apps across every single category, fintech, etc. So it's just a massive category that we are both I'm both personally passionate about, and also think it's just massive and growing. And then also, being a crypto investor, it's been amazing seeing the intersection of gaming and blockchain tech. So, both I've been spending a lot of time with the publishers and talking with them through their strategy, but then also meeting with dozens of blockchain gaming teams as they're building kind of natively these games. And so super excited to invest in the category. And I think, we're actually closing our first investment right now that we're working on with Solana. Very excited. And so, yeah, really pumped in the space.
I guess I was born a little too early. I kind of quit gaming around the time the NES came out. But I played that a lot. And I happen to remember this one thing. If you guys remember the original Mega Man game, part of that game is you defeat characters and you get their abilities, right? And I got really excited when I learned that the Muscle Man character could move things around.
Oops, just lost Brady. But anyway, for people who don't know, I mean, at Lightspeed, we have about a dozen companies in our gaming portfolio, big investors in Epic Games, just announced our investment in Splitgate. And then we have about, half dozen or so pre-launch AAA studios and counting. Brady, we lost your last question.
Welcome back.
I was just can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
An experience, but it's cool. So let's go back to Axie. So, I think folks who maybe are casually aware of Axie, maybe read a couple of stories about its recent success, sort of know that there's this battle element and there's this kind of, wander, very traditional gaming formats that people are used to. Let's forget about all that. That's the stuff people know. I know there's also like a more traditionally what we think of as metaverse element. There's like a land element, a sort of invitation to developers to build their own things in there kind of side. What can you tell us about that at this point, Jeff? And like, what can we look forward to about the Axie real estate, Axie land, you know, the open world of Axie?
Yeah, so I think land is one of the things that our community is most excited about, definitely. It started out initially as terrariums. So we were like, okay, all pets, Axies are pets. All pets need a home, right? And then I think we realized that this vision could be much larger, and that kind of gradually morphed into a land system, right? So there are kind of three threads that we think through when we're looking at land. So there's this this element of collecting resources. Some of those resources might be real tokens, building a town, a village, a city. So kind of crafting and building, right? Then there's this idea of kind of a persistent world that is constantly, with some areas that are constantly up for grabs, some territory that might be yielding resources, and for there to be this constant, struggle and battle for resources between kind of warring kingdoms or factions or tribes within this universe. So that those are like two elements. And then there's the third element, which is, okay, maybe, you bring in this idea of kind of like a Roblox-like game creation platform where you can have third-party developers, community developers, hobbyists, maybe even in some cases large game studios building experiences on top of the land. So I think the art is to how do we prioritize development on each one of these threads, and but yeah, and then also, so I think one of the things, is just talking to the community. It seems like in the short term, the MVP could definitely be more focused on harvesting resources and maybe building up. So basically letting the art and the in-game economy kind of carry things. But I think long term, more complex battles for territory, as well as this ability to build on top, I think that's going to be really, really important, and basically allowing for something that could last for 50 years, for example. So yeah, that's at least, I don't know, a window into how I'm thinking about it.
Some of that starts to become realized. I mean, land is available to buy right now, right? But you can't really do anything with it. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, so we did it. We had an internal alpha, so we had an open alpha for all landholders to check out what we had finished about 9 months ago. So people have used their land in the past. Yeah, it's something that takes a lot of care and effort. So we hope to have something playable out, something fun for people to get their hands dirty with, maybe next year in early first half. It's quite difficult to give predictions around these types of things. We tend to think in terms of pipeline these days.
Idea. No, I get it. And folks should take that to heart. These things are really tricky. And Amy, what do you, as an investor, what's Lightspeed's take on land in these games? I know, I used to work for DCG kind of indirectly through CoinDesk, and I know they were very excited about Decentraland. What's you guys' take?
It's definitely right now. I mean, it's interesting as asset for speculation. I would say land has become really valuable very quickly, even before I even have any idea how to play, what is actually built on it. And the game around the land is ultimately going to be really important. And so yes, I'm pretty excited, Jeff, to see what you guys have up your sleeves there. I think for developers that are game developers that are thinking about incorporating land into their blockchain game, there's probably two genres of games I would encourage them to take a look at. One is 4X games, and the other is just open world. And so on the 4X side, if you look at sort of Game of Thrones or Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes to an extent, and some others, and certainly the MMOs like Eve and others that have some aspect of land property elements to it. There's I think it's important to create game loops and gameplay that really drives player sort of like skill coordination strategy, right? That's like the core of like the 4X game. You know, how do you control your land? How might you use it? Maybe like conquer somebody else's land. I think those like really encourage deep interactions between players, engagement, and we'll be able to create whole like, you know, amounts of like, they will allow like players to really have a lot of fun with the land concept. And the other one is more of like the Animal Crossing style gameplay, right, around land. It's like you own your property, you build things. It's a lot more of a casual type of game mode where you can buy furniture for your house and plant gardens and things like that. And it's more around nurturing and building rather than like competition and strategy. And so depending on like what kind of a genre you're building, you can utilize land in different ways. But that's the kind of thing that I really like to hear from game makers around what they're thinking.
We're talking to crypto folks here. We need some alpha for folks. Like, what is the smart place to, you know, put your resources? Is it, should they be looking for the tokens of good games, or should they try to get ahead of this whole land thing? What's the move?
Yeah, I mean, if you can try to get in as early as possible on the token side, or you know, on these early sales on the land side. I think the way that, for example, Ember Sword had done it was that they had oversubscription of people trying to buy land, and then I think Jeff, you guys did too. And so there was sort of like well, we're going to decide Ember Sword, and they needed to, and then they decided sort of who got what plots of land. And I imagine that probably has something to do with like the degree somebody was involved in the community. And so I think that's really key, you know, like if there's more dollars trying to find their way to like buying early game token and land. And so make people show you that you're an engaged member of the community on Discord and otherwise, in order to participate in that.
I wanted to ask both of you about, you know, Jeff, not that I want you to talk about competitors, but I feel like, you know, you guys have got a kind of the pole position in the space right now, so it doesn't matter too much. I could be wrong, but, you know, it seems like games are a hot thing right now. They're maybe like sort of the next thing, like actual games, sort of the next thing, kind of following kind of pure collectible NFTs, maybe. So I know there's some kind of cool blockchain related games out there that aren't quite as widely known as Axie right now. Can we get some suggestions for folks of things they might want to just go poke around? Not saying that they're like, you know, guaranteed going to make a lot of money off of messing with them, but just like what are good blockchain games that seem like they have potential that you both have seen?
Steph, you want to go first?
Me?
Go, do Amy first.
Okay, me first. The interesting thing is that there's not a lot of games that are live, right? Because it does take like years to build a great game. And so like in the dozens and dozens of teams I've talked to, people are building right now and their games are going live on a time frame of like maybe in 6 months time to like a few years out. And so like honestly, I think that in terms of what's live, Axie Infinity is the most fun like game to be playing right now. And that's why you guys are so dominant. You know, you were there kind of earlier than almost everybody else. And so I encourage people to follow this space. I mean, in terms of projects that have a lot of like, you know, I think I'm super interested in play testing, things like Dark Forest or Ember Sword, Parallel Lives game, or
That's a blockchain game?
Yeah, these are all
Ember Sword
blockchain
is a
games. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Illuvium, Star Atlas. There's so many Genopads. Like there's like a lot that are coming out, and I think in a couple of years' time, we're gonna have this like renaissance of like blockchain games for gamers. But in the meantime, you know, I think Jeff, you guys, you know, don't have a ton of competition in this space. Live.
It's actually one of my biggest
stuff open. You can kind of get involved a little bit now. So like, yeah, Jeff, what's your take? Like, what looks promising to you?
Yeah, I mean, so I would, you know, I first of all, like just on the competition aspect, right? Like I would love for there to be many more blockchain games that are live. I think, you know, Axie, like I think like what we need is we do need other projects that are bringing in more players, more content creators, right? This ecosystem. people can only play Axie for around 5 hours a day. So I'd love for them to be able to play other games in those other slots. It also is important for the dominant. It's also important for the dominant product in a market to have smaller products to look at, so that they can A/B test features for us. So we can like, okay, this loop is working really well in that game. Like we need to also have that. That's also right in the spirit of open source and blockchain and blockchain development, right? It's just like forking code over and ideas. But yeah, so that's it. I mean, I invested in a game called Nine Chronicles, and I've invested in Aurori. Nine Chronicles is live. That it is a Korean team that's been grinding for a long time. So yeah, I would take a look at that. I like that it seems like they have a fun game. But more importantly, they were building, for a long time, when nobody was looking at the space. So I think that they're onto something. So yeah, but I would say one thing that I will say is I'm a little bit unsure. A lot of people, they're obsessed with this idea of making like a AAA, like super, I don't know, like really intense, graphically intense game. So then it's like, okay, maybe you're limited to desktop users, right? Which is actually like kind of a shrinking market where, if you want your total addressable market to be 4 billion people, which is what Axie is aiming for, it should be mobile. It should be like Android friendly, if that makes sense, right? So I would just caution maybe in that, like, if you're going for like a desktop super high performance game, you're going to be competing. You're basically right. This is going to be kind of like for Western or East Asian players. And then it's like, if you add the play to earn loop, it's like, what is the daily wage that these people with very very powerful computers, what is the wage that, what is the play to earn mechanic? How high does that need to be in order to make it worth your time? Otherwise, okay, like, yeah, you can make a really amazing fun game, and then but you're kind of like you're competing against the rest of the games out there. You're not necessarily like, I think, and if you've read, like, I don't know, David and Goliath, right? It's like, what is the unique thing that we can use to slay the incumbents? It's this idea, I think, of play to earn, right? That's why no NFT project was able to experience exponential growth until the invention of play to earn, right? Why? Because this is a novel thing. It is sometimes annoying that people focus only on that, because then the fact that Axie is a fun and a very fun game kind of gets lost in the discussion. So some people think that the only reason that people play Axie is because of play to earn. But yeah,
you guys have done well. Oh, can you hear me? It's interesting you guys have done well with play to earn, because I've been a real critic of the token. I have I got a call there and just screwed things up. I've been a real critic of the token powered social networks, because having watched a few social networks, even ones that were before tokens, that were trying to like reward people monetarily for participating, they just became really irritating to be a part of, because like all anyone talked about was making money on them. And I guess I would have at the outset worried the same thing would happen with games, but it doesn't seem like it's quite happened. I'm gonna do a quick random aside just to Jeff. You said you played StarCraft or whichever one of it. That's the same guy as who was working. He was in the giant crowd sale to make like Star Citizen or whatever. Is that the same? Is that the connection there? Do you know what I'm talking about?
So StarCraft is like the Blizzard game. It's like the national sport of Korea when I was growing up.
I think I'm confusing with a different one. I don't know if you know, I was just curious if this story gave you pause. There was a big game developer from like the 90s who made a big game that was Star something. And then around 2014, he had the biggest crowd sale of all time at that time to create a new open world universe. And it's kind of been a disaster.
Right? I mean, is it ever going to launch?
So, yeah.
Like never?
Yeah, Star Citizen. Yeah. I wondered if, like, going into, like, if you knew that story, if that gave you pause, sort of trying to create a universe somewhat like that, even though a little more chill.
Yeah. I mean, it's like certainly a concern of mine. I mean, I think right now we're at this point where, you know, NFT drops do not make like a game. I think I think teams can raise like 10, 50, $100 million right now if you just say that you're making a blockchain game. But I mean, I really am listening for like, what are they actually building? Are they serious about game design? Do they want to make a fun game? Do they even understand like what you know that entails? And to Jeff's point, it doesn't need to be AAA. It can be something a lot more casual, right? Like for example, the team that both Jeff and Solana team and I are really excited about. We're going to talk announce soon is a browser gaming company that decided that, you know, it was like really conducive to actually port into blockchain because of MetaMask, Phantom Wallet, and other wallet integrations. That's not a AAA game, but you know, like certainly there's a lot of like game design know-how that team has, right? And so like when I see like, so I think right now we're in this moment of time where there's so much money going into blockchain gaming, driving up round sizes and valuations. Sometimes when I talk to teams, I feel like I get weird looks just by asking, okay, so like, tell me more about the actual game that you're making. And ultimately that's what's going to matter. Like, and the NFT drops are an amazing signal for whether the team knows how to engage community and also make great art. But ultimately, like people are going to stick around if they have something like fun to play.
So NFT drops, I wanted to ask you guys about this. Are you all loot believers or loot skeptics? Like what is a list of items going to become a game?
I can start. I think it's like an absolute phenomenon. So I don't even know people like hating on it. Like the fact is that it captured so many people's imagination and also FOMO because so few people actually got loot, at least the primary drop. And then in terms of like how I see that community developing, it reminds me of modding, right? It truly is like you're asking the community to build a game for you. And so I'm like, you know what? Like a couple of really amazing game devs could probably build something amazing if they so are if they're incentivized and they want to put the time and energy into it. So you know, I'm not gonna bet against that. Like, but I think that's kind of what it would entail. Like I think it's certainly difficult to not have like a centralized team to actually drive some of that organized, you know, and build like a first party game. Like mods are usually built around like a core game. But I mean, this is like a new paradigm that is being explored.
Yeah, Jeff, do you buy it? Or are you a skeptic?
I mean, I own some loot. I will say that I bought it 1 ETH, and it's done, you know, it's done really well for me, I guess. You know, I mean, I'm a moderate when it comes to like things like this. In terms of, I believe in, you know, I believe in bottom up contribution. I think that's super important. But I also think that, you know, you also need a team or a group of, you know, many large teams driving forward the development of a project. So yeah, that's one thing that I would look towards. I would say that I was really excited about loot, but then I was also like, I was a little bit like turned off that some people were trying to like co-opt the narrative because, you know, when I discovered Axie, it was also 6 words. Each Axie was just, or sorry, 8. Each Axie was, yeah, just 6 traits. And I felt like that wasn't necessarily something that we could even brag about at the time. It was a bear market. Like people would, people were just were not interested in it. Like, so until people could actually see their Axies, maybe because like the original team was like Vietnamese or something, there's something like there, like people just were like, okay, is this actually a scam or what? Right. But I think this idea of basically a user owned and governed and built game universe, I think it's incredibly important, and I think we want to like incorporate the strongest elements of that into Axie, right? We have, you know, long term, we do believe that that Sky Mavis will be just one of many teams building on top of Axie, the Axie universe. Right now, right, like my team is only 3 people or 4 people. So it's like the majority of them, and we've never spent any money on marketing, right? So it's like we're in a large, in some other game company of this scale, right? Driving this amount of revenue. I don't know, you probably need like 100 people or something, like doing marketing and stuff like that and publishing. So the community right now is actually doing a majority of the work related to content creation, education, onboarding. Yeah, it's just so I think like that is also an important thing to look at. We're already seeing this. I do think that, yeah, people are excited, and rightfully so, about the idea of like modding culture making its way into Web3 as well. So.
Sorry, Jeff, you said something there that I'm not sure I understood, or maybe people don't know. Did Axie not quite start with you? Like, you said something about when you discovered Axie. Like, what's the backstory
I started
there?
out as a community member. So when I discovered Axie, it was just 10 people, or maybe like 10 to 20 people in a Discord, and they had just revealed. I think like I found out about it when I just started out as a community member. I bought some Axies, and then I bought 3 Axies, and I couldn't see them yet. And then it was a whole event where, okay, like this is, you can finally look at your Axies. And then because I own some, I was like, okay, like what do we do now? Like we have to make sure that this project does well. So I started helping manage the community, just started increasing my involvement over time. And then eventually it was like, okay, let's start a company to build on, to kind of make sure that this vision is completed. And that's, how Sky Mavis started, right? Sky Mavis was not even a thing when Axie started. So.
No, I knew that. I just didn't realize. It's that's sort of like how MakerDAO started too. That was just kind of a gang and some forums with some ideas.
I think, I mean, there's definitely something to like, right, like this grassroots team formation. That's really powerful.
So for the skeptics out there who were like, I mean, they understand that gaming's big and gaming's valuable, but I think it is a little hard sometimes for folks to picture, like, why are these things that people gather up in these games, like, why do they have real world value, and kind of like a lot of real world value? How do you help people picture that and understand it? And Jeff, let's start with you, but Amy, I'm sure you have thoughts on this as well.
Sure. I mean, so one way to look at it is we're living in an increasingly digital world, right? For the last 2 years, we could barely go outside. So our digital possessions, our digital identity is starting to become increasingly more important, right? Nobody cares what watch you have, what car you have, things like this. So in a pseudo-anonymous digital environment, like what are the ways that you can kind of show off, just kind of identify yourselves? And show that you're, I don't know, a connoisseur, or you're an important person, you're someone worth talking to. I get thousands of messages each day. How do I prioritize who I even respond to? There have been people who, because they have the right Axie as their picture when they message me, because of that, it's led to like more conversations, it's led to substantial relationships, right? So if we believe that, right, the cloud is becoming a great place to make, right, like very deep economic and social relationships, then the way that we curate for the people that we interact with in these environments is becoming important. And if we can use our digital items and our NFTs basically as ways to curate who we speak to, who we become friends with, then, right, there's real value to generated through that process. Therefore, there is real value assigned to these items.
What about you, Amy? What's your take there?
And the core question is, I guess, what to make of like the NFT craze right now, something like, or how to think about the value assigned.
I think more specifically, like, why are in-game items like sort of how do they have real value in the real world? I think that's just confusing for like the man on the street,
Okay, I see.
Especially like a lot of value, like Axies are really expensive, like to get a few Axies to play, it's a good chunk of cash.
Yeah. I mean, a digital good or like a piece of art or anything is valuable as what the owner and others like believe it to be, right? And then the more that item has value beyond just like, how much can I sell this for, which, by the way, is like the primary use case for buying NFTs. Still speculation. It's definitely collectors. And then some of the artists is beautiful also, or the Axies are very cute. Like if people want to collect those, I mean, as an investor, I'm always thinking, and also as a gamer, the more you can imbue value into this item, the more valuable it becomes. And we've long believed that gaming was the best use case for NFTs. And so if you're able to play with that asset, whether it's an Axie or it's an in-game sword or something, or like a skin, use it. Maybe you can use it with another game, but maybe it's just like within the closed game ecosystem. That essentially kind of imparts value to the owner, right? And you're starting to you start being able to, or wanting to spend more money to acquire that item, or more time in order to acquire that item, because you're getting a lot of like ROI from it. You use it, or you like looking at it. So that's why it's, in terms of like how valuable is this in the outside world? I mean, probably like it's not valuable at all. But like, do I think an item that I've been basically grinding to get, like in, I don't know, my MMO game or whatever, is valuable to me in the digital world? Like, absolutely. And I'm like willing to spend money on that. But it has value in the context of the metaverse, kind of like digital worlds. Or maybe the value outside of that is more like bragging rights, like, oh, I have this item, like I paid X amount of money for this, and now everyone knows that I can afford that. But really the value is in game.
And that you brought up something there that I was writing about NFTs long before they were really popping off. And I actually sort of got a little bored about writing them at a certain point, because I kind of was starting to doubt that they were going to, and then they did. And I was wrong about that. But one of the things that folks talked about a lot back in those finger crossed days, kind of 2018 and 2019, was this notion that people would start composing with other people's items. We'd start seeing crypto kitties and Axie or whatever, and that just really hasn't happened. Do you guys think it will, or is that sort of a misunderstanding of how people are going to really think about this stuff?
I think, so for me, like I'm on the growth side of things, right? So when I look at a mechanism, I try and obviously, I don't know, it's related to what I do within the network. So for me, like horizontal interoperability, basically, using game assets from one ecosystem in another, I've always seen that as an attack vector or a marketing strategy. So it's like, for me, okay, why would I give use for some other NFTs? Like, okay, if they had a really large community that I wanted to introduce to my game, I would do that. But the problem is there are no super large NFT communities yet, if that makes sense. So I think it's going to become a thing. I think it's going to be less like friendly. Maybe I'm just not a friendly person, but like I see it as less of a friendly thing.
I totally
will it be like kind of like Sushi Swap and Uniswap? Like, you'll say, like, if you bring your in-game items over to our game, we'll blow it up.
It could be a potentially a vampire attack, right? It's like destroy all your, right? So in the beginning, like we were thinking like, oh, like, well, let's let people pay with Gen Zero kitties for Origin Axies or Axie Land, right? And then we basically finish sucking up the rest of the CryptoKitty community that we hadn't like absorbed in the beginning.
I'm so with this. Like, I think idealists talk about interoperability of these NFT items a lot, and I think like there is like a format in which in the future metaverse, like interoperability is like a wonderful, wonderful thing. Practically, I don't really see like why somebody with like the audience base like Axie Infinity, or a large gaming publisher with hundreds of millions of players has any incentive around bleeding their audience into another ecosystem. So I really see it as like, with NFTs, interoperability is always like an option, right? Like, but I see kind of like smaller projects and blockchain games maybe like trying to help each other out, like drive audience by allowing that interoperability. But like, it's kind of like the flow goes one way. Like there's not kind of, it's difficult for there to be an incentive for like a large like game to want to bleed users like downstream. That's a separate issue from like, oh, idealistically, like, should it? Right? Like, I'm kind of separating the two. And then there's a practical, questions. For example, if I have a sword and it's like this much power in one game, how do you just like port that into another game and like not blow up like the game economy in that other game? So like, how do you coordinate that? I can see it a lot more easily with a skin. Let's say I have a cool hat that I bought like for my avatar in one game. I want to port that over to another game. That'd be super cool, right? Then my avatar, I keep my my identity, and I can keep that my identity cross game. Like that's cool concepts. But like porting a game with power cross game, that's difficult. And I think for anybody who like can't actually articulate like how that works, but talks about interoperability, just means like you haven't thought about it. And then the second thing is like people use different gaming engines, right? Some people might use Unity, some people might use like Unreal. And so how do you then do interoperability when there's a different engine in the back end? There's a lot of practical questions I think people haven't really asked themselves. But I think like in the future, if I can start using items across multiple assets as a player, right, I would get a lot of value out of that. I think there's like less incentive for the actual like game maker to do that.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So somewhere in here is somewhere in here though is some like important revelation about like what loot is, right? Either like how loot can be super useful or how loot is actually a really stupid idea, right? I think you can make both arguments. I don't necessarily want to get into it right now, but or
no,
like,
I was,
but it's something around that, right? Is like, okay, so it's like you have this community of 3,000 people or something that are really passionate about it. So it's like, okay, if you integrate loot into your game, like maybe you can get these 3,000 like pretty passionate, maybe pretty rich people to like take a look at your game, right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was thinking that too. I was also just thinking there's a good chance if loot works out, it really doesn't become one game, it becomes several games. So there's this sort of like interoperability of this common set of things. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting ways of thinking about that. But I am so psyched for the first game-on-game vampire attack, and I really want to cover that story. So I'm pumped that we got to that here. So okay, we're about out of time. It sounds like, Amy, you have some kind of answer to this question. We're at a Solana event. I've never really heard anything about games on Solana. Is there anything going on there that either of you can tell us about? It sounds like, Amy, maybe you know a little bit there. You can't maybe tell as much as you know, but what's up with gaming in Solana?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the leading blockchains to go after this category. It's the fastest throughput. I know they're working on some scalability issues right now as we speak. But I think like
wrote about that this morning.
Yeah, fundamentally, I mean, this blockchain's got the highest throughput, I think, of any blockchain. And I mean, obviously, there's a few others, Ronin, etc., like that that can really like that can really support a game, but really not everybody can. And Solana can. And they also have like a pretty awesome dedicated team to support players that want to play on that want to build games on the ecosystem. So I think Jeff mentioned Aurori, I mean Star Atlas. There's like a number of others. There's also ecosystem players, like infrastructure players, like that are starting to like Stardust that are starting to be built, so that it really helps facilitate game makers who want to build on Solana to do so in a faster, easier way. And so yeah, we're pretty excited about the game ecosystem on Solana.
Jeff, you have any insights, or is Amy our expert there?
I think Solana is pretty interesting. And I think like it's maybe a good place for people who are kind of like, just learning how to build in Web3 to get started. So yeah, I think, to be honest, like, yeah, I think like more playgrounds for experimentation around NFTs are needed. I also think I believe that we're going to need many different scaling solutions for games, because like the blocks are going to get full on Ethereum layer 2 on Solana. Maybe like that's what was causing the issues today too, right? So it's like I think we're going to need many different scaling solutions. Our approach with Ronin, which is basically Axie's custom scaling solutions, can be, I think we want to start out at least like a little bit like Nintendo, where we have our own nice in-house IP, and then maybe we'll partner with some very select IP that kind of meets our standard and our kind of brand, if that makes sense. Just like basically, I think our brand is introducing the world to something that's very scary, blockchain, through something that's cute and relatable and nostalgic. So if we see titles that are doing that, I think we'll be doing that. So anyways, I think that there's a universe where we'll need many of these. Hopefully, if the space goes exponential, as I think we predict in the next 5 years or so.
Cool. Well, thanks a ton to Jeff Zerlin, co-founder of Sky Mavis, which is behind Axie Infinity, which this conversation made pretty clear, and Amy Wu of Lightspeed, dedicated gamer and investor at Lightspeed Ventures. My name is Brady Dale. I'm a reporter with The Defiant, and I will definitely be covering the story of games and blockchains developing over this next year and into the next one. So hope to see you all as that story develops, and I hope we're all there to watch close at hand when the first vampire attack game on game happens, because that's going to be amazing. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Brady.